I'm excited to introduce our next panelists. Get ready to hear from allies working to make changes to California cannabis at a policy level. Today, we're so pleased to welcome California Senator Stephen Bradford. In 2018, Senator Bradford had SB 1294, the California Cannabis Equity Act, signed into law, a first in the nation bill that encouraged equitable participation in the cannabis industry and fostered business opportunities for individuals who have been negatively impacted by the war on drugs. In addition, Senator Bradford secured $5 million in funding for community college reentry programs for current and formerly incarcerated students, and $10 million for local cities and counties with social equity programs to support individuals who are most impacted by cannabis criminalizations, helping them enter the burgeoning cannabis industry. In 2019, Senator Bradford was successful at getting 10 bills signed into law by Governor Newsom. The legislation covered a wide range of subject areas, including SB 595, which addressed the lack of inclusivity and equity within the industry by providing social equity applicants with application or licensing fee waivers and deferrals. In addition, Senator Bradford was successful at securing over $40 million in critical funding for the support of these cannabis equity programs. Thank you, Senator Bradford, for being a true ally in creating a more equitable cannabis industry. Next, I'm very grateful to introduce California Senator Nancy Skinner. In 2016, she was elected to the state Senate by representing much of the East Bay. Senator Skinner has repeatedly sought to ameliorate racial and class disparities in the state's criminal justice system. In both the Assembly and the Senate, she has carried legislation aimed at preventing mass incarceration of youth and people of color, and on removing obstacles to formerly incarcerated people reintegrating into society upon release. For example, by eliminating prohibitions on people with nonviolent drug convictions being able to get food stamps. Senator Skinner has been instrumental in advancing progressive criminal justice legislation by authoring major reform laws to make police misconduct and use of force records open to the public. For Skinner's work on SB 1437, California Attorneys for Criminal Justice named her the Legislator of the Year. In January of 2020, Senator Skinner wrote legislation that would allow cannabis companies to provide free trade samples to educate retailers about the product, something the industry desperately needs. Nancy will be joining us towards the end of this conversation. So I'm grateful also to introduce California Senator Scott Wiener. Elected in November of 2016, Senator Wiener represents District 11 in the California State Senate, which includes all of San Francisco, Daly City, as well as some portions of South San Francisco. In 2019, Senator Wiener's legislation to exempt compassionate care programs from state cannabis taxes went into effect to provide free medical cannabis to people living with serious health conditions. This passed the Assembly with a 71-0 vote. This 5-year pilot bill exempted all donations of cannabis and cannabis products to patients holding a valid physician's recommendation or a medical identification card. It also allowed compassionate care programs to partner with a licensed retailer to facilitate donations, thereby allowing them to get vulnerable patients access to safe and regulated products. Thank you, Senator Wiener, for your support for medical cannabis patients. It's truly appreciated. And moderating today's conversation is California Assemblymember Rob Bonta. Rob Andres Bonta is an American politician serving in the California State Assembly. He's a Democrat representing the 18th Assembly District, which encompasses the central East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area, including Oakland, Alameda, and San Leandro. Rob Bonta has been helpful in advocating for lower taxes and boosting the regulated market. Assemblymember Bonta, I hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks for the kind introduction and honored to be with you. Thank you to the Meadowlands for putting this together and for having this important discussion. Again, I'm Rob Bonta, and I'm in the California State Assembly representing Oakland, Alameda, and San Leandro. Honored to have been one of the joint authors of the MCRSA back in 2015, and to be working with my incredible colleagues that are here today on the panel to help move forward a thriving and regulated and safe legal cannabis market in California. And appreciate again the opportunity to be with you all. And this has been a difficult challenge that's ongoing. And I know that it's hard for so many of you in the cannabis industry right now. I'm appreciative and happy that we've had the essential designation for the cannabis marketplace during COVID-19, probably a critical lifeline for you to be able to continue to operate and support our patients and our adults in California. And a lot has changed in a short time with MCRSA in 2015, Prop 64 in 2016. And that was the beginning of the work, critical work. But we have still, in my view, not yet fully realized our promise to Californians who voted for Prop 64 to have a legal, thriving marketplace. There still continue to be challenges, and we can have a discussion about that with our panelists, whether it be taxes or other burdens, whether it be the illicit market and its continued existence, and in many ways its thriving nature at times. We need to make sure that our good actors who are honoring all the rules and want to be California businesses like any other business, paying taxes, creating good jobs, are able to be successful and able to thrive. So I'm excited for this panel. And who do we have here today? I think I have Senator Wiener and Senator Skinner, and is Evan Lowe with us as well? And Stevie B, of course.
Right now, I think we just have Senator Bradford. I think Senator Wiener and Senator Skinner will be joining us. So if you
well, let's go with Stevie B. That's who I was looking forward to anyway.
Oh, stop!
Yeah. Awesome. Good to see you. Good to see you. All right, let me be professional. Good to see you, Senator Bradford, my colleague in the legislature, but really just a righteous and powerful voice for equity, for justice, and he knows the key social justice and equity components of a regulated cannabis marketplace. So he represents LA, of course. He's been my colleague for a long time, and I appreciate his energy, his passion, his powerful voice. So let's start with Stevie B, and maybe go right to Senator Wiener's here as well. So hi, Scott. Good to see you, and thank you for your efforts. You've been a longtime supporter of a regulated cannabis marketplace since before you came to the Senate. And I call my old friend and we were colleagues at the San Francisco City Attorney's Office before we became colleagues in the legislature. He's the Terminator. He never says, he will never stop. He will always push for the things that he knows are right. SB 50 is going to pass at some point. And he's one of the hardest working legislators and people I've ever seen, and driven by righteous policies and values. So thanks for being here, Senator Wiener. Let's just jump right in. Senator Bradford, why don't you make some comments on SB 1294, the California Cannabis Equity Act, why you authored that and why you think it's important?
Thank you, Assemblymember Bonta, and I want to thank you for your leadership and your friendship as well during our tenure in the legislature and all the great work that you've done in this space. The reason I introduced 1294 in 2017 is because I had an opportunity to meet with the Cannabis Bureau under Lori Ajax's leadership, and she was giving us an overview of what the department was going to do and their challenges, and we quickly found out, no knock on her because she's spent a career in ABC, that many folks were very new to this industry and didn't understand all the challenges was there. And even one of her staff members stated, I didn't even know it was this many different strains of cannabis and all the different varieties and all that it was doing. And that made the light go on to me that we need to do a better job and diversifying those who not only regulate the industry, but also those who are part of this industry. And it was an industry that was in its infancy, and it quickly demonstrated that majority of the operators were white males. And I have plenty friends who are white males. I have no knock against them, but when you have a industry that was less than a year in its growth, and the majority of that, those who had already had licensed and were up and running, didn't look like the community in which they were trying to serve. But most importantly, as I stated, had this been about the criminalization of cannabis, the majority of people in the room would always be Black and brown people. But now when you're talking about the opportunity from an entrepreneurial standpoint, we were outside of the room. And in order for cannabis to be successful, everyone has to have a seat at the table. And we just can't be consumers. We should be able to achieve the promise of the entrepreneurial growth and ability that we presented in Prop 64. So that's what made me introduce 1294. I was happy when the governor signed it that year, but when it came down to enacting it and rolling out the first pool of money, it was $10 million in that measure. We've since secured another 30 million, but when that 10 million was supposed to hit the streets on April of 2018, we saw the list of where the money was targeted, and I was alarmed, I was upset, and I ran down to the governor's office and I says, we need to stop the presses because $4 million should not be going to Humboldt. I mean, Humboldt in no way has ever been impacted by the war on drugs from a criminalization standpoint. Now they have the internal wars in the triangle as it relates to growing and all those things. We all know that exists, but when you talk about the communities that have been impacted negatively by cannabis and the lack of diversity in this area. So the governor agreed. We did a reset and we reallocated to money, and we wanted to make sure it went to cities and communities like in Los Angeles and Stockton and Barrio Heights and down in San Diego, those areas that we've seen the impact. So has it been successful? No. And what we've seen also is a lot of folks who are hiding behind social equity, saying really this is what we're here for, but really they just want the money. And again, we want people who are truly from the community, truly committed to hiring within the community and growing a business versus people who are trying to exploit it. Because I remember meeting with a business owner, a grower, who wanted to come into my district, and he met with me in Sacramento, and I spent 20 minutes listening to why he wanted to open up a grow in Compton. And no time did he say, well, I'm interested in employing the people from the community. I'm interested in improving the tax base. None of that came out of his mouth. The reason I said, well, why did you pick Compton? He says, well, we polled and it came out number one as to where people wanted to buy their cannabis from. Not necessarily go buy the cannabis, but where it was grown, because of the association with people like Snoop and all, the rap luminaries who constantly reference Compton in all their songs. So, and I says, that's not the reason why you should come to Compton. And I quickly ended the meeting. So hopefully 1294 is going to help us really target those communities that need this money and the operators who are genuine about diversity and equity and making sure not only minorities, but women as well have opportunity at the table.
Thank you, Senator Bradford. And just a quick follow-up, what are your plans, if any, for the future, maybe the next legislative session, to build off the work that you've already accomplished with 1294, maybe to get it more in the direction that you're hoping for to accomplish its original goals?
I'm hoping for ongoing funding for equity, social equity. I mean, it shouldn't be one and done, and we were able to secure another 30 million the following year. So I thank the governor for that. Also, I introduced 595 last year, which was the fee waiver and deferral, but we're still hearing about, the cost of entry for a lot of these small operators, and they haven't been able to take advantage of 595. So we want to make sure that those fee waivers and deferrals are real, that entrepreneurs who qualify, who need the help, will be able to get the help. But I also want to look at the tax area. We've talked about that. We know there needs to be some kind of reset, because if we don't, we know people are going to continue to use the illicit market when you have almost a 30-40% markup from a legitimate place versus, the regular guys you can go on the street. And I'm tired of people referring to it as the black market, because it's no black and brown people in this illicit market anymore. So hopefully we can look at some tax. And as you all know, banking, we have to really address the banking issue. Not until we allow folks to bank this industry can they ever qualify for loans. We saw due to this pandemic that cannabis was identified as an essential business, but they didn't qualify for PPP. So it's somewhat ironic that, they've been deemed as an essential industry, but again, since it's still a Schedule 1, they didn't qualify for any of this loan program. So just kind of like removing those barriers. I had introduced a resolution earlier this year to Washington asking them to remove cannabis from the Schedule 1. So dealing with that and the banking challenges and looking at some of the tax structure.
Good stuff. Important issues, ongoing issues, certainly could benefit from some help at the federal level. Maybe November 3rd would spell a new chapter at the federal level for treatment of cannabis. But a quick follow-up question. Ramon is asking it in the chat. And of course, the one and only, the inimitable Max Michalonis has sent me a private message. Always staffs me, even when he's no longer on my staff. Thank you, Max. You're the best. But a question about your SB 595, Senator Bradford. And Ramon is telling us that it hasn't received funding and is not achieving its goals of waivers. Is there a way we can work together to get it working for those who it was intended to help?
That's key. I've heard from plenty of businesses. Just yesterday, I was on a panel similar to this. An individual clearly showed his receipt for paying $9,000 in fees. And I'm like, you should have been able to take advantage of that. So no, we have to work on the funding and this fee waiver measure and put some real teeth behind it. I mean, as I constantly say, it means nothing to pass a piece of legislation if it's no real teeth and enforcement behind it. So I'm definitely want to work on expanding this, getting money there. That's why I think the social equity piece should be an ongoing funding issue in the state budget if we really are committed to boosting up this industry and hoping it lives up to all the expectations that we have. Because again, we know the medicinal benefits. A lot of people still want to view this as some drug, illicit drug, but we all know that this plant came into existence thousands of years ago, not for the purpose of getting high, but for medicinal benefits that it provided individual and the industrial use as well. So we need to do also better education, educating those local elected officials, because again, 75% of communities still say no to cannabis. And not until we are able to educate them and say, hey, this is an essential business and you need to support it, will any of this ever take hold and achieve the goals that we want. So yeah, I'm going to work on 595 too. So any help that you can offer, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Perfect, Senator Bradford. Appreciate all of your work in this space. And speaking of medicinal use, which you mentioned, let's turn now to Senator Wiener. Welcome, Senator Wiener. And can you make a sort of opening remarks about your work in this space? And as you do, if you're willing, can you touch on your SB 34, the Dennis Perone and Brownie Mary Act, cannabis donations tax exemption, and why that was important to you?
Sure. And thank you to my colleagues for all of your amazing work in this area. I know it's been hard. Moving cannabis legislation is never easy. Governor Brown, I think, always had the attitude that it all had to be done in the budget so he could control it. Hopefully that's changing with Governor Newsom. But there's so much work to do. And before I get to compassion programs, I think an area that we have not yet tackled that has to be is that there are huge numbers of cities that are effectively banning cannabis through land use and through local taxation that makes it just impossible. And then trying to even ban delivery. And so we're seeing big swaths of California where there's continued lack of access. And I don't know, given my wars with some of our cities around housing, I don't know if I have another big local control fight in me, but maybe I can be the wingman for one of my colleagues in that fight, because I think we have to grapple with that hopefully sooner rather than later, because it's gone overboard. But in terms of medical cannabis, we always have to remember, I mean, it's amazing that we legalize adult use. I supported that. It's awesome. We're a better state for it. Hopefully Congress will get its act together and businesses can start banking and all that. But we have to always remember the roots of this community and make sure that the non-corporate side can survive, and make sure that people who do not have a lot of money can always get their medicine because they can't get it paid by their insurance company if they have insurance, or by Medi-Cal. We need to make sure that people who don't have a lot of money but have medical needs can access their medicine. And the challenge that we've had, of course, is that with adult use, the industry becomes so commercialized and corporatized that you can lose that. And so even though Rob may dispute me on this, I know Nancy Skinner and I have had debates about this. Since I represent the birthplace of medical cannabis and the heartland of the movement, with Dennis Perone and Brownie Mary and all of the other amazing heroes who helped, save our community during the worst of the HIV/AIDS pandemic in our city, when so many people were sick and there was no effective treatment, and cannabis helped them to get through it to the point where there was actual pharmaceutical help. These are people who put their own freedom on the line because they subjected themselves to arrest or prosecution for years and years and years, and they really are heroes. And compassion programs, which I know you all know far better than I do, are a critical part of that. Providing free medical cannabis to people who need it and who can't afford it, and helping people stay healthy. It's not just about HIV, it's also about PTSD and other mental health conditions, anxiety. There are other conditions too. We have so many veterans who rely on medical cannabis, and we heard testimony from veterans about how cannabis helped to get them off of the opioids and the harsh pharmaceuticals and help get their lives back together. There are children who benefit from cannabis treatments for severe conditions. We heard from parents about how cannabis stabilized their kids' health. And so many more and more seniors for arthritis or whatever else are understanding its importance. So it's really real. And given the costs of retail cannabis and the taxes and everything else, it can be prohibitive. And so when adult use was legalized by the voters, I think inadvertently, the taxes that were imposed were also imposed on compassion programs, which of course, by definition, have no revenue. They're giving away cannabis. And so we saw in San Francisco just compassion program after compassion program closing down because they couldn't pay the taxes. And then for the businesses that were donating cannabis to these compassion programs, they had to pay taxes too. And so that would just limit the amount that they would donate. It was a financial issue. And so several years ago, we decided we really need to just exempt compassion programs from state taxes. We tried to get it done in the budget in 17 or 18. It didn't work, so we introduced a bill in 2018. We got it on the governor's desk. Now, every time this has come for a vote in the legislature on the floor of either the Assembly or the Senate, it's gotten a 90% vote. Broad bipartisan support, between people living with HIV and veterans and everything. It becomes a mom and apple pie issue for both Democrats and Republicans. Governor Brown vetoed it. We came right back and then moved it through, and Governor Newsom signed it. So that was a huge win. And I think this coalition saved the idea of having robust compassion programs. And I think a lot of people are benefiting from it. So thank you to everyone who supported that effort.
Thank you, Senator Wiener, and thank you for reminding us all about the need to continue to prioritize the roots of compassion and equity and social justice and medicinal use, and for your work in this space. It's one of the things that we're getting a lot of questions about is how can the folks who are listening to you right now, advocates, folks passionate about a regulated, legalized cannabis marketplace, how can they work with you, especially now in these different times with COVID-19 and physical distancing and maybe more virtual meetings? How can they work with you to uplift issues and move programs, bills, budget proposals that help drive the industry forward? Why don't we start with Senator Bradford, and then we'll go to Senator Wiener.
I think by sharing some of the real life experiences that people are encountering, it helps us shape legislation. I often state that if you leave it up to legislators on our own, would more than likely get it wrong. So we need to hear from you. We need your voices. But at the same time, I think not only educating your legislators, but educating, you have advocates such as Senator Wiener, Assemblymember Bonta, Senator Skinner, but to those non-believers in the legislature, and more importantly, those non-believers on the local level, as Senator Wiener stated, that's where a lot of the roadblocks we're encountering is on the local level. So reaching out to your mayors and your city council people and let them know that this is the law of the land, and whether it's for adult use or medicinal use, this product is important. And as I try to tell my elected officials in my district, you don't have to have a dispensary to support this industry. You could open up a commercial kitchen where it manufactures, those edible products, whether again for medicinal use or for adult use, whatever. You can have testing laboratories. We do not have enough testing laboratories, and I'm thankful for the governor for signing my bill the other day, SB 1244, which now allows those legitimate businesses to have their product checked, tested, and also force those illegal operators to have their product tested, because safety should be all of our concern. So just again, reaching out to us, but more importantly, reaching out to those non-believing elected officials and community folks and letting them know how important this industry is.
Yeah, I will say that I think it's incredibly important for people in the community, both not just in the industry, but just people who believe in this. And I know, there's a lot of organizing that happens there. Absolutely needs to let elected officials know, we're in your community. I'm a voter in your community. We employ people in your community, et cetera, et cetera. And we want you to be supportive because this is not just like a Democrat-Republican issue. There are some Republicans who are superb on cannabis, and there are some Democrats who are really bad on cannabis. And that's why with this administration changing, God willing, I'm not sure that all in for Joe Biden. I don't really think he's going to be the biggest champion for cannabis. In the Obama administration, we had some real challenges with some of the raids. So there are Democrats who need some, need some help sometimes. And so that kind of communication is incredibly important. And then I would say in my office, my staffer who handles cannabis is Angela Hill. Various people on the Zoom have, I'm sure, worked with her. We work with all the associations and so forth. And so if people want to identify, problems that are happening, or maybe fixes that are needed, or ideas for legislation, or, help with advocacy to agencies, just, you can reach out to Angela. I will say that sometimes we get random ideas from different folks in the cannabis community. It's always great when there can be there's never a true consensus in this community, I've learned, but at least, a critical mass of people thinking this is the right move. Because sometimes you get an idea from someone and that causes a reaction from someone else.
Thank you, Senators Bradford and Wiener. And I was remiss in not earlier shouting out David and Aria from Meadow. Thank you again for bringing us together. I appreciate this conversation. You both mentioned the fact that local jurisdictions are banning cannabis in a way that may not be aligned with their vote on Prop 64 in those jurisdictions, and certainly is leading to a lot of restrictions. What do you think the legislature, the state, or anyone else can do to address that issue? Tough issue.
Yeah, well, first of all, we have to, I'm a Democrat. I'm a liberal Democrat. I support a lot of different taxes. I'm not allergic to taxes, but we're in danger of taxing cannabis out of existence because there are pretty steep state taxes. I know that Rob has, tried repeatedly to try to address that, and has hit a wall. But hopefully he'll keep trying, because the state taxes are not, they're too high. And I don't usually say that as a Democrat, but it's true here. And then you stack the local taxes on top of it. It can be, a mess. And San Francisco did that. Other cities have. Again, liberal San Francisco, this bastion of cannabis, and we enacted an additional tax, a significant one on top of the state tax. And by the way, San Francisco, our Board of Supervisors came very close a few years ago to effectively banning new cannabis businesses in the city and county of San Francisco by putting forward very poorly thought out zoning legislation that would have just wiped new cannabis businesses off the map. And so even in liberal lefty places, you know, that some of the NIMBYism, oh, we don't want a cannabis dispensary within 1,000 feet of a school, or we don't want this, you know, it's just all the worst stereotypes of what cannabis is and what a dispensary or other business is. Even in a place like San Francisco, that kind of weird stereotyping, NIMBYism, it just comes into play. And so we have to, I think we need to address at the state level, not just our own taxes, but putting some sort of limits on what the local taxes can be. And we do this with sales taxes, where we say, here's the sales taxes, this goes to the state, here are what locals can do, here is your cap. And sometimes we talk about that cap and we lift it a little bit for certain counties, and that's fine. But there are constraints and limits, and you can't just, as a city, say, we're going to have a 30% tax on cannabis on top of the whatever it is, 25% effectively the state imposes.
You know, great points and great observation and reminder about the overall cap on sales taxes between local and state. Something to consider going forward. Senator Bradford, any thoughts on this? Taxes or bans?
Without a doubt, I think you are right on target with 1948. We need to continue to expand upon that. As Senator Wiener stated, it's somewhat ironic that your local folks are concerned about the illicit market, but by the exorbitant taxes that are being placed both on the state and the local level, it helps enable the illicit market to come into existence. So they're kind of creating the problem that they're trying to avoid, so to speak. So again, I think it's a critical need to educate these local elected officials about this industry as a whole. Again, they only see it from two aspects of this: growing and selling, and it's a whole lot in between, from delivery to packaging to testing to, like I say, the commercial kitchens to create these products. And there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, I have a city in my district that has millions of square feet of warehouse, and they would be primed to do some of these industries, businesses there, and they're still saying no to it. So again, until we wrap our arms around the tax aspect of it, but again, I think the greater part is educating these local communities of the benefit and the jobs that it's going to create as well. So, yeah.
Good points, both of you. Thank you for that. And I see a comment in the chat here from my friend Michael Wheeler at Flocana, who's saying that the legislature and the state can provide a signal to local jurisdictions, perhaps in the form of a resolution, saying that we're encouraging the appropriate authorization of cannabis businesses in local jurisdictions. And for those of you who were there, you'll remember this: the MCRSA deal, the sort of grand compromise that we reached after years of not being able to reach one, did involve a very strong dose of local control. So unable to get anything done back then in 2015, local control was really important, but it does certainly has been going in a way that is not what we hoped for or desired. And as we evolve and continue to perfect and improve our system, we need to be able to make some changes. So, and on the tax issue, that one has always been delicate. As Senator Wiener said, I've authored a bill for a number of years to reduce the excise tax and as well as the cultivation tax temporarily to help businesses migrate from the illicit marketplace to the regulated marketplace. There are folks who believe that that will lower the overall tax revenue. I believe they're wrong. I believe it grows the tax base with more participants, and they'll pay, the overall taxes will grow. But we've got a lot of resistance there. And certainly now, as we face a multi-billion-dollar deficit in the state, I think some of our colleagues might be resistant to do something that will reduce revenues that are coming into California when we're in such a precarious position. So just some thoughts on those two issues as we go forward. I also, speaking about, referring to what Senator Bradford said earlier, there's a lot of local leaders, mayors, city council members who have very little expertise and knowledge about cannabis and cannabis policy, and probably many have little interest in it. So when they see the choices before them to sort of dig in and learn and provide a thoughtful, appropriate local ordinance, or just to banning it often seems easier and less troublesome and faster. So I think the state might have a role in providing good templates for local jurisdictions for, sort of things, a set of choices that we believe could lead to a good local set of policies. Go ahead.
I was just say, and I'm not trying to, and this isn't about demonizing cities. There's a lot of people are like, they're all in for legalized cannabis. But again, they have stereotypes of what it's going to mean if it's in their community. And so there's a lot of pressure on these city councils, and they just don't view it as a high enough priority to fight with their constituents about it. I think also for a lot of smaller cities in particular, they don't have always the staffing to do the kind of appropriate work that a bigger city like San Francisco or LA can easily do. And so it's just I agree with Rob, it's sort of a headache for them a lot of times in terms of constituents, having to set up new structures in the city government. And even though they'll get, some revenue and be able to pay for it. So it's not surprising that we see cities throwing up their hands.
Thank you, Senator Wiener. The issue of the illicit marketplace has been raised multiple times in our conversation. It continues to thrive. It undercuts the regulated marketplace, the good actors who are following all the regulations, paying their taxes, paying their fees. What can we do about that as a state? And just keep in mind that enforcement is obviously a natural answer, but there's also been a history of enforcement in the cannabis marketplace that maybe is not a history we want to resurrect or repeat. So how do we get it right?
I mean, enforcement is key, but as we all know, when we talk about enforcement, it's usually in the Black and brown communities. It's usually those communities who have already been impacted most negatively. But there needs to be a balance. But I think it goes back to, again, the taxation part of this and the education, because again, by putting such a heavy local tax, it's only going to encourage the underground market. Because again, if I'm a consumer and I've been getting it from Joe Blow down the street, and now I go into a dispensary and for the same product, I'm paying 30 to 40% more, I'm going to continue to go to Joe Blow down the street, and we're going to create exactly what local officials say they don't want, and that's that illegal market. So I think, as stated, we as elected officials from state level could signal some way of these elected officials to maybe ease, but we keep talking about the lost revenue. We're losing revenue every time we push somebody to the illicit market. So I think Assemblymember Bonta, your efforts to reduce taxes, I think will only spur this growth in this industry, and it won't hurt it. So, because we're far from the promised or the anticipated numbers that we thought we would garner from this industry almost 3 years into it. So I think we need a reset.
And I think it's important to just always remember that prohibition doesn't work. And prohibition, when you prohibition or effective prohibition, you can enforce until the cows come home, and it's not going to work. We learned that with the war on drugs. It just doesn't work. And so even though we have on paper legalized cannabis in California, as we know, in huge swaths of the state, it's effectively illegal. And then even in the areas where it's legal, between some of the restrictive zoning or the taxation, it's become very expensive. And so we are fueling the illicit market. It's a form of prohibition, not total prohibition, but partial. And so we're not going to be able to enforce our way out of that. The solution is to sort of, I hate to use the term because what's his name does, but drain the swamp. Just make sure that the legal market can really thrive and stop stifling it. And that will, over time, reduce and not eliminate, but come close to eliminating the illicit market.
And if I might add, I think Senator Wiener hit the nail on the head. If we look back historically, at alcohol prohibition. That was the growth of organized crime. That was really the seed that grew organized crime here in the United States, the prohibition of alcohol. And that's what we will do here again. We will not only extend the illicit market, but we will promote organized crime, because that's who's going to control this market. That's who's going to control this market if we prohibit it.
So we all just ended a legislative session together. It was a session like for me, like no other before, unique in its challenges, in the pressures put on us both with the pandemic and the recession. Any reflections from either of you on how the recession, or sorry, the legislative session was impacted, how our work was impacted, and how you feel we can adjust going forward to make sure we're doing what we need to for Californians generally and for the cannabis marketplace specifically?
Oh boy, it was quite a session. I mean, and you know, it was just, we had the 2-month, break, not really break, but recess because of the shelter in place, and then we came back. We had another recess, an unnecessary one. Sorry, Rob, to criticize your house, but we did, and it just the session was very complicated. In addition, the legislature reflected the rest of the planet, of everyone being a little bit grumpy and unhappy and sort of pissed off at the world. And so it played out in terrible ways with, like, within the Senate, we had a meltdown last day of session because our Republican colleagues decided to have a COVID party, basically, because they were not respecting the things they needed to respect. And they had to participate remotely, and they got mad, and it just melted down the House for a while. And then there was this just irrational tension between the Assembly and the Senate, which was worse than I've ever seen it. None of it made sense. And so the session, we ended up getting quite a few good things done. I think that, to be clear, a lot of good bills got put on the governor's desk, but we missed opportunities as well. The good thing is, when we come back in January, we're going to be probably in a similar state of affairs to today. It seems like it probably will be more like the middle of the year where we're going to start seeing hopefully significant positive change. That at least now both houses have sort of figured out how we conduct business, how we do committee hearings, how we do it, and people are more comfortable with those interactions, and how we still have our staff work remotely, but we're in the Capitol when we need to be. And so it was awkward, but I think we now have those structures in place, including remote participation in the Senate. And so I think things will be smoother next year. And especially if we have a change in administration in January, I think people will be in a much better mood. Hopefully we'll have a vaccine starting to roll out, even if everyone can't have it yet, and hopefully some good therapeutic breakthroughs. And so I'm hoping that 2021 will be the year of, like, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. People are more optimistic and forward-looking.
I love your optimism and the facts that drive it. And I'm hopeful that we can achieve those goals too. Senator Bradford, any thoughts?
I would just say ditto to what Senator Wiener stated. I think it was a lot of lessons learned with this year. And as stated, a lot of good legislation got done, but a lot of craziness happened as well. And I'm saying, outside of Tuesday's debate, some of what we experienced the last week was also a crap show, as Dana Bash stated. So, but hopefully we will improve upon that and move forward, and get some of the stuff that was was put on the side. Some of the criminal and police reform bills that didn't make it through. I hope we have an opportunity to really look at those this next session and move those forward as well.
Of course, you had a very important one on decertification, Senator Bradford, that hopefully continues to have life in.
And that one,
future.
Sorry, Robin, interrupted.
No, go ahead, Senator Wiener.
No, I was going to say on SB 731, kudos to Steve Bradford for carrying that bill. I was honored to serve as a co-author. And even though that died, the good thing is that there was a less expansive version of the bill that Governor Newsom vetoed specifically because he said it didn't go far enough. So that bodes well for his participation next year.
And we've already got early sign off by leaders of both houses that there's going to be a commitment to moving this legislation forward. So I look forward to working with Senator Wiener and all the other colleagues who signed up as a co-author on this and getting it to the finish line.
Thank you. I was proud to be part of the effort as well, and requires a big coalition on these important changes. So we get more done when we work together. You know, when I was reflecting on the year, and I was seeing some of the press that was critical of the legislature, I thought, as Senator Bradford said, that we got a lot of really important legislation passed and signed that helped people, that leaned into this moment, that made some of the transformational change that we need. And I was thinking, you know, it wasn't unlike other years where some of the most transformational, aggressive stuff doesn't quite make it, but a lot of other important legislation does pass. But I also thought that upon further reflection, that maybe this year we need to do more. We needed to step up further, just because of the pain and the challenges that Californians are facing. So maybe doing it like we did in other years wasn't quite enough, that we needed to do more. And I've always been perplexed, frankly, by the tension between the houses. You know, we're all Democrats. Many of us have worked together, you know, as colleagues in one of the houses before the member moved to the other house. Senator, or the pro tem was our speaker, you know, was my speaker in the assembly before becoming the pro tem. So we're all on the same team. And I believe, like Senator Wiener does, that we'll get it together. We'll learn from some of our challenges and do better going forward. One issue that's come up, Senator Bradford talked about it, is the fact that because of the view that the federal government has of the cannabis industry, some of the robust relief that is being provided by the federal government to businesses throughout the nation, including California, do not apply to the cannabis industry, including the PPP. Typically, when folks are ineligible in California for federal relief, but there are folks that are important to us, like our undocumented immigrant community, we provide that support, as we did with a fund to support undocumented Californian workers who were not eligible for some of the pandemic unemployment assistance that was coming from the federal government. So is that a model for what we should be doing in California? Or let me just ask it in an open-ended way. Given that the cannabis industry is not eligible for some of the federal relief, what, if anything, should California be doing to provide support?
I think it goes back to the taxes. If they can't get direct federal funding, I think we can aid them again with the fee waivers and deferrals, the reduction of taxes. I mean, those will have immediate impact, because what I'm hearing from many of these small businesses is the price of entry into this market. It is so costly. I mean, the fact that many folks have maintained a lease on a piece of property, you have to secure that first before you can even get a license. And I'm hearing people paying tens of thousands of dollars a month in rent, and they're a year away from being able to get up and going. So, I mean, we need to provide some assistance there. I think Senator Wiener even mentioned earlier some of the zoning as it relates to rentals right now, and the impacts that they're putting on these businesses, and just making it cost prohibitive for them to enter the market. So I think that's where we need to start. I mean, outside of the federal government, we can do that right now in the state of California, and we can encourage those local entities to join on board and waiving some of those fees as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really challenging because you know, we have to balance our budget, unlike Congress, and we can't print money, unlike the Federal Reserve. And so it makes it really hard for us to put meaningful investment into any kind of small business support. You know, when we have public school system, and we have you know, our safety net, and we're trying to avoid cuts there, and we may have some trigger cuts coming up because Congress, at least as of now, has not provided aid to state and local governments. There seems to be a little bit of movement there, but we'll see. So it's really hard, but I agree with Steve, some of the regulatory and tax relief could go a long way.
Great. And we all know that we're in a pandemic-created economic recession. It's impacted the state budget, local jurisdictions as well. Not sure, Senator Wiener, how San Francisco is faring, or Senator Bradford, how LA is faring. My guess is it's like everybody else, they're struggling. and revenue is low. How should that condition expectations in the cannabis industry about what can get done this year? Are we looking at only, revenue neutral solutions, or is it possible to provide some revenue investments into some of the solutions for the cannabis industry?
I'm sorry, I don't know that I caught all of that.
Yeah, just basically, what does the reality of our economic recession mean for the solutions that we can provide to the cannabis industry? Or should we only be thinking revenue neutral type of solutions? Or do you think we can, as a legislature, prioritize some budgetary outlays to pay for something like a tax reduction if it costs money, or for investments in equity, or for maybe access to low interest loans? And I'm also seeing here that Senator Skinner has joined us. So my senator, welcome, Senator Skinner.
She heard me say her name, so it summoned her.
Do either Senator Bradford or Senator Wiener want to answer the question about revenue challenges at all, or?
Well, Senator Skinner is a guru on the budget, so she might have something to add here.
Yeah, totally. I call her the budget wizard. So the budget wizard is with us. So what is our current budgetary constraints? What do they mean for what we can do in the state, Senator Skinner? And welcome. Hi.
Thank you. And thank you all. Really happy to be here. And I don't need to say a lot, but as I've said in other of these events, I am a user of the good herb for a good, Mr. Bradford, should I be revealing how long? Should I let anybody know how old I am? Anyway, let it put it more than 40 years, and have had, I coordinated the first campaign in Berkeley. Well, it was the second campaign, but the first one that actually stuck and wasn't thrown out by court. So I coordinated the 1979 decriminalized marijuana campaign in Berkeley, with including coordinating a raffle that where we raffled off a kilo. And I'm sure some of you are like, what the, why would you, but in those days you needed a whole kilo because you needed a big fatty to even get the least bit. Anyway, but we'll leave that alone. The products have clearly improved, and I even have friends and growers in Humboldt and Mendocino that are responsible for some of those hybrids and strains. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. Let's go back to budget. We would be we already are cutting off our nose to spite our face by overtaxing and overregulating the industry, because we are not collecting what we could collect, because by overtaxing and overregulating, we have created that pathway still for the illicit operators. Now, it's like any industry, there will always be illicit operators. However, there's going to be a lot more motivation for illicit operators if we got it right for the legal operation. And interestingly enough, and I think Senator Bradford was there, John Hickenlooper, who was governor of Colorado, who's now running for Senate in Colorado, he came to see us at one of our, Jerry Brown had him, and he came to see us it was right before the initiative passed or right after, and he said, look, this is the most important advice I can give you. Do not rely on your legal businesses to provide you a lot of state revenue right away. You're going to miss the boat. If you overtax and overregulate them, then you're not going to get the benefit of a fully legalized industry. You're going to just continue to drive an illicit market. So he warned us of that. And some of us took it to heart. I think some didn't, but that's what I think we need to do. We need to help. And I think the governor understands, but I think the rest of my colleagues in the legislature just need to pull back, because if we pull back, then within a year or two, we will receive more revenue. Because clearly, especially during the midst of this pandemic and all the other anxiety that's going on, many of us need our cannabis products. So it's not like the demand is going to go down. No, it's not going to go down. But we need it to be within our legal industry. I'll leave it at that.
And the governor also said a diverse market will help grow too. He stressed that as well. So
yes. Yes, because overregulation hurts. When we think about, and Senator Bradford knows this too well, when we think about the equity issues, you have much less access to the ability to withstand all the bureaucratic rigmarole and the months to, to get approvals or whatever, if you're a smaller operator or one of our equity operators. So if we really want the diversity in the industry and not have our equity operators functioning still within the illicit businesses, then we got to make the pathway for them. And it's not just about, and again, it's not to make anybody wrong, but just saying, oh, we'll have special permit or something for, a few equity operators. No, we just need a playing field where it's easy for them to participate. They were in the business longer than most people. Leave it alone.
No, great points around patience and restraint on regulation and taxation. And let me stick with Senator Skinner, since we want to make sure we get her full voice in the room. You introduced SB 475 for cannabis trade samples.
Yes.
Can you talk about your interest in that bill and what?
Well, that's another example. We want a legal industry. Californians up and down the state said, look, make this product legal. So you think about every other product, we allow for trade samples, even within pharmaceuticals. And but we don't within the cannabis market. So we still, even though our voters have told us loud and clear, we're still treating cannabis as something, scary or bad, or so. I was carrying that to allow for trade samples, and I forget why. I don't remember if it was a probes or what, but I didn't bring it back this year only because with COVID, we just weren't even meeting, but I will come back next year. And I'm happy to be your partner on other things that the industry may need. Just let me know.
On that point, do you have any specific plans for cannabis bills in the new session at the moment?
Certainly. My staff and I haven't really put together our whole list of legislation yet. We're still recovering from the fact that 2 of our bills, we only had 3 on the governor's desk, 2 were vetoed. I have never, I pride myself on a really good record on legislation, but whatever. Anyway, so do not take that as normally I am one of the legislators who has both the most bills on the governor's desk and the most signed. So, don't stay away from me, but I'm happy to get suggestions from you, because I think that obviously my inventing legislation that is that just in my head is what the industry needs. You know best what you need. So let us know.
Great point. And we have 123 participants here who are eager to work with their legislative champions like Senator Bradford, Senator Wiener, and Senator Skinner on moving policy forward. So we have about 5 minutes left by my clock. I want to do a quick speed round and ask each of you, you have the magic wand now. You can make whatever policy change that is needed federally or at the state level to move the cannabis marketplace forward and advance it. What would you do? What's the most important thing or things that we should be doing to move the cannabis industry forward?
Well,
Nancy, we can't hear you.
You might be on mute.
Sorry.
Oh, we got you.
Okay, I think we need a revision to local control so that those localities that are refusing to honor what was in the initiative and provide for a pathway for our legal businesses, I think we need to basically, we gave them, they've had a chance. If they're still being resistant, then we need to take local control away on those communities.
And I love that. And I also want to encourage, I'm seeing quite a few responses going into the chat. Put your responses in, all 123 of you. I'm seeing banking, I'm seeing revisions to local control. But tell us what you think needs to be changed if you have the magic wand. Now we'll go to Senator Wiener and Senator Bradford.
I think the local control issue, rebalancing that. I think lowering the state tax and putting constraints on local taxes like we do with the sales tax. I think those are the most, and then getting Congress to do its job and allow banking.
Yeah, I would add moving it from a Schedule 1 for sure, because if we understand the historical piece of why it was moved to Schedule 1 in the 30s, it was to, incarcerate Black and brown people there, and that's the only reason it was moved there. But also, banking is critical. I mean, and it makes the state somewhat of a hypocrite because we take in millions of dollars weekly from these businesses who walk their money into the franchise tax board, and then we walk it across the street and we deposit it into the banks. So if we're able to bank this money and deposit this money, why shouldn't these businesses be allowed to deposit their money? So banking is critical to this.
Totally agree. And we're seeing a lot of great responses in the chat. Senator Bradford, some folks are saying here, fund SB 595, which they deeply believe and support in that bill of yours. Also, tax reform is here a number of times. So great responses. And then finally, you all have been champions for many different policy areas: criminal justice reform, housing, social justice generally. Besides cannabis, where you've been champions, what are you focused on? What are your top priorities? Maybe one or two things that you're really looking forward to pushing forward in the next session. And Senator Bradford's already touched on his decertification bill, which is very important to provide police accountability. But anyone just chime in on what you're focusing on. We do have some interest in the areas outside specifically of cannabis that you're focused on.
Well, I'll do some aggressive housing work next year, like we always do. I think we want to do some big things around criminal justice reform. I think we're in a moment in time where we may actually be able to really move the ball. I mean, we're starting to actually identify the first prison to close down. We need to close down more and free up that money and stop that destructive system of mass incarceration. I'm hoping that next year we can, I think California is losing our leadership role in climate. We're actually going to start missing climate goals because we've been so obsessively focused on our electric system, which is important, while doing very little to reduce vehicle miles traveled and to stop building sprawl and pushing people into wildfire zones and 2-hour commutes and all the things that are increasing our carbon emissions and strangling the planet. So we want to start making some bold moves to move away from fossil fuel extraction next year. And we have to have more sustainable transportation and land use and housing patterns, as a matter of climate. No more sprawl, no more of this, forcing people into wildfire zones. People are talking about prescribed burns now. I think people are going to realize that that's a lot harder now than 50 years ago because there's so much development has happened in these areas. So we have a lot of work to do around climate.
Senator Bradford or Senator Skinner?
I would just continue to expand upon equity, regardless whether it's in this cannabis space, if it's in education, as in housing. I think this pandemic has shown where this was not just a health crisis for people of color and our frontline workers. It was an economic crisis. It was a housing crisis. It was an educational crisis. And we've seen long enough that there are two Americas, one for the affluent, and then there's one for the poor and minorities. And we need to kind of find a way to treat everybody equal, and we're not there yet, far from it. And as a former employee of a conservation corps, but at the same time as a former employee of a utility company, we got to look beyond wind and solar and quit being so narrow-minded in what we view as a renewable, because there are a lot of renewables like Bloom Energy and fuel cells, things of that nature that we need to add into the mix, because in order for our energy policy to work, it has to be diversified, just like we want the cannabis industry to be diversified and our workplaces. Governor signed Chris Holden's bill on diversity of corporate boards. I mean, diversity is key. So if we need diversity in our workplace, we want diversity, we need diversity in our energy portfolio as well. So I would say a better expansion of renewable products.
Awesome. One quick point on the banking issue that you've all raised is that East West Bank and Travis Kyoto is doing some limited banking of cannabis companies in California. So an important progress being made there. Senator Skinner, final word for you.
Sure.
Your top priorities for next year, and then we'll wrap.
Sure. Thank you, Assemblymember Bonta, and also, well, all of the folks, the legislators that you have on this panel, we have all been very, very involved in the various changes and reforms to right size our, what I don't call our criminal system. I don't call it a criminal justice system because it's not just. And the various things that we've done along with others, we're now at the place, finally, California was the poster child for mass incarceration. Today, we have the lowest number of people sitting in state prison that we've had since 1990. And we got to keep that up. And that, of course, if we can get down further, then that's going to free up a lot of money because we're spending over $13 billion on our state prisons. And we would need to rely less on overtaxing the cannabis industry if we were not spending so much on our prison industry. So I will continue to be very focused on the reforms that reduce incarceration, both county jail and state prison. And I don't know if Assemblymember Bonta mentioned, but it's very, very important. There are some good groups who are opposing the bill or opposing the elimination of money bail. I just want to be really clear to you. Everyone needs to vote yes on the eliminating money bail. You need to vote yes. And because until we eliminate that industry, we cannot properly address how to deal with that and keep our populations in county jail and prison staying low. But for next year, I'll be coming back with my police records bill that didn't get over to the Senate, and I'll be assisting Senator Bradford deliver his very important bill on decertification of our law enforcement officers. So those are two big priorities: police records, making them more available, and the decertification.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that about Prop 25.
Thank you for, I just always forget that. Prop 25.
A lot of numbers. Yes, on Prop 25, everyone. Well, thank you. Let's give this incredible, esteemed social justice set of champions on the panel a round of applause. Senator Stephen Bradford, Senator Scott Wiener, Senator Nancy Skinner. Thank you to David and Arya for having us. Thank you to Meadowlands for putting this together, and appreciate our time together. Let's keep partnering and working for a better cannabis industry. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Bye, everyone.